Zixera pressed her three-fingered hand against the cool metal of her dormitory wall, staring at the acceptance letter displayed on her personal screen. The Galactic Academy of Sciences had finally approved her transfer request. After 2 cycles of studying at the lesser rim universities, she would finally join the most prestigious institution in known space. Her excitement bubbled through her chest cavity, making her breathing slits flutter. As a Vort hack from the outer colonies, this opportunity was beyond her wildest dreams. The Academy only accepted the brightest minds from across the galaxy, and now she would walk among them. The transport ship hummed beneath her feet as it approached the Academy's massive station. Through the viewport, Zixera watched the structure grow larger. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Crystalline spires twisted upward from a central hub, each one housing different departments. The engineering section glowed with blue energy, while the biological studies wing pulsed with green light. "First time seeing the Academy?" asked a voice behind her. Zixera turned to see another student approaching. This being was tall and slender with silver skin that seemed to shimmer. For arms extended from its torso, and its head was elongated with large, dark eyes. "Yes," Zixera replied, suddenly feeling small. "I'm from the Outer Rim." "You?" "Kethmos, from the Core Worlds. Third-year student in advanced physics." The being's voice carried an air of superiority that made Zixera's confidence shrink. "What's your field?" "Comparative biology and species analysis," she said quietly. Kethmos made a sound that might have been laughter. "Ah, you'll probably end up studying the primitives then. The Academy has been collecting data on all sorts of backward species lately." "Primitives?" "Oh yes, there are thousands of them scattered throughout the galaxy. Species that barely understand fire, let alone space travel. The Academy studies them to understand how intelligence evolves." Kethmos gestured toward the station. "Most of them are so weak and helpless that they'll probably extinct themselves before they ever leave their home planets." The transport docked with a gentle bump, and students began filing out. Zixera followed the crowd through gleaming corridors filled with beings from dozens of different worlds. She had never seen such diversity. There were crystalline beings that clicked as they walked, gas-form entities contained in environmental suits, and creatures with so many limbs she lost count. Her assigned room was small but comfortable, with a bed that adjusted to her body shape and a workstation that activated at her touch. The walls displayed a rotating view of space, showing distant galaxies spinning slowly in the void. The next morning, Zixera attended her first lecture in the Grand Amphitheater. Professor Veltar, a respected Zolonian researcher, stood at the center of the circular room while students filled the tiered seats around him. "Welcome to comparative biology," the professor began, his voice amplified throughout the chamber. "This semester, we will examine the vast diversity of life forms across our galaxy. From the silicon-based crystallites of Nexus Prime to the energy beings of the void clusters." Zixera took careful notes as Professor Veltar discussed various species and their evolutionary paths. Everything was fascinating, but she noticed a pattern in the discussions. Certain species were consistently described as advanced, while others were labeled as primitive or developing. "Now," the professor continued, "we come to one of our most recent discoveries. A species calling themselves humans from a small planet in what they call the Milky Way galaxy." Images appeared on the central display showing bipedal creatures with pink or brown skin, sparse hair, and small eyes. They looked fragile compared to most of the species Zixera had encountered. "These humans are particularly interesting because they represent a textbook example of a species that should not have survived," Professor Veltar explained. "Observe their physiology." The display zoomed in on human anatomy. No natural weapons, no claws, fangs, or venomous capabilities. Their skin provides almost no protection. They cannot see in the dark, their hearing is mediocre, and their sense of smell is practically useless. Students around the amphitheater murmured in agreement. Zixera had to admit the humans looked incredibly vulnerable. They have no fur for warmth, no shells for protection, no specialized abilities whatsoever. By all evolutionary logic, they should have been eliminated by their planet's predators within a few generations. A student near the back raised a tentacle. "Professor, how did they survive long enough to develop intelligence?" An excellent question. The current theory suggests they compensated for their physical weaknesses through primitive tool use and basic cooperation. However, their development has been remarkably slow. It took them hundreds of thousands of years to discover fire, and they only achieved basic metallurgy within the last few thousand years. Professor Veltar switched to images showing human settlements. The buildings looked crude and inefficient compared to the elegant structures Zixera was accustomed to. Their technology is primitive at best. They still use chemical combustion for many purposes and have only recently begun to understand atomic theory. Most remarkably, they have yet to achieve faster-than-light travel, despite having the theoretical knowledge for several centuries. "Are they dangerous?" asked another student. The professor's expression suggested amusement. "Hardly. They spend most of their time fighting among themselves over trivial matters like territorial boundaries and resource distribution. Their conflicts are small-scale and use primitive kinetic weapons. A single Academy security drone could pacify an entire human city without difficulty." Zixera found herself feeling sorry for these humans. To be so weak and backward must be a terrible existence. "The humans do possess one potentially valuable trait," Professor Veltar added. "They show remarkable adaptability to different environments. They have spread across their entire planet, from frozen polar regions to scorching deserts. This suggests a certain resilience, though it's likely just desperate survival instinct rather than true strength." The lecture continued with discussions of other species, but Zixera's mind kept returning to the humans. Something about Professor Veltar's dismissive tone bothered her, though she couldn't quite identify why. After class, she approached him during office hours. "Professor, I was wondering about the humans you mentioned today." "Ah yes, quite pathetic specimens, aren't they?" he replied while organizing his notes. "What specifically interests you about them? You mentioned they adapted to many different environments. Doesn't that suggest they might be stronger than they appear?" Professor Veltar paused his work and looked at her with what might have been pity. "My dear student, adaptability born from desperation is not the same as true strength. These creatures simply go wherever they can find food and shelter. It's the behavior of scavengers, not advanced beings. But surely their rapid population growth indicates something positive about their survival abilities? Rapid breeding is typically a sign of a prey species," the professor explained patiently. "They produce many offspring because they expect most to die. It's quite common among lower life forms." Zixera left the office feeling unsatisfied with these explanations. That evening, she accessed the Academy's database to research humans more thoroughly. Most of the available information supported Professor Veltar's assessment, but she found a few details that seemed inconsistent with the image of a weak, primitive species. Humans had eliminated most large predators on their planet. They had developed complex societies with millions of individuals cooperating across vast distances. Their art and literature showed sophisticated abstract thinking. Most intriguingly, they had recently begun sending primitive exploration vessels beyond their home system. The more she read, the more questions arose in Zixera's mind. If humans were truly as weak and primitive as everyone claimed, how had they achieved these things? And why did their technological progress seem to be accelerating so rapidly in recent decades? She decided she needed to learn more about these mysterious creatures, though she had no idea that her curiosity would soon lead her to discoveries that would shock the entire galactic community and change everything they thought they knew about humanity. 3 weeks into the semester, Zixera had become obsessed with human research. Every free moment was spent in the Academy's vast digital archives, searching through exploration reports, biological surveys, and cultural analyses. The more she learned, the more convinced she became that something important was being overlooked. The breakthrough came during a late-night study session in the restricted archives section. While searching for additional human data, she discovered a sealed file marked with the highest security classifications. The timestamp showed it was less than 6 months old, which meant it contained recent observations. Her academic clearance barely allowed access, but after several authentication protocols, the file opened. What she read made her breathing slits contract in shock. The document was a field report from Captain Thexville of the scout ship Silent Observer. The Galactic Council had apparently sent a covert surveillance mission to monitor human development firsthand. What the captain described contradicted everything taught in Professor Veltar's lectures. Day 47 of observation. The report began. The humans continue to display behaviors that don't match our initial assessments. Today I witnessed what they call a marathon race, where thousands of individuals ran continuously for over 4 hours, covering distances that would challenge most galactic species. Zixera scrolled through dozens of similar entries. Humans regularly engaged in activities that pushed their bodies beyond normal limits. They climbed enormous rock faces without assistance, dove to crushing depths in their oceans, and voluntarily entered environments that should have killed them. Day 73. Observed human construction workers building a structure during what they call extreme weather. Outside temperature was well below their normal comfort range, with high winds and precipitation. Rather than waiting for better conditions, they simply wore protective gear and continued working. Their determination borders on the irrational. But the most startling discoveries were in the later entries. Day 134. Major revision to previous threat assessment required. Witnessed human military training exercises. What we initially dismissed as primitive kinetic weapons are far more sophisticated than reported. The humans have developed projectile systems capable of engaging targets at ranges exceeding 3 kilometers with remarkable accuracy. Zixera felt her chest tighten. 3 kilometers? Most galactic species relied on energy weapons with much shorter effective ranges. Day 156. Psychological profile requires complete revision. Humans demonstrate a capacity for sustained conflict that exceeds all models. They maintain fighting effectiveness under conditions of extreme stress, injury, and resource deprivation. Several individuals continued combat operations despite wounds that would incapacitate most species. The report continued with increasingly disturbing observations about human warfare capabilities, but what truly shocked Zixera were the technical assessments. Day 203. Engineering analysis complete. Human technology development is not slow as Academy models suggest. They have achieved more technological advancement in the last century than most species accomplish in millennia. Their rate of innovation appears to be accelerating exponentially. Captain Thexville had documented human achievements that weren't mentioned in any Academy curriculum. They had weapons capable of destroying entire cities. They had developed computer systems that performed billions of calculations per second. Most incredibly, they had created vehicles that could carry massive payloads beyond their planet's atmosphere using nothing but chemical rockets. Day 267. Recommendation for immediate council review. The humans' rapid development timeline suggests they may achieve faster-than-light capability within decades rather than centuries. Their current space program, while primitive by our standards, demonstrates engineering principles that could easily be adapted for advanced propulsion systems. Zixera realized she was reading classified intelligence that painted humans as far more capable than any Academy instructor suggested. But why the secrecy? Why were students taught that humans were weak primitives when the evidence clearly indicated otherwise? Her research was interrupted by footsteps in the archive corridor. Quickly closing the files, she pretended to study standard course materials as a figure approached her station. Working late again, I see, said a familiar